In this unit, we will talk about negation and negative polarity items in some South Asian languages. As we understand, natural language itself is a very unique endowment to humans. Only humans speak natural language. In other words, we can also say what humans speak and how they function with language is the defining part of natural language, is the definition of language. It has been established in literature, particularly in the field of acquisitional work, that humans acquire language naturally from their immediate surroundings. It grows with us, it grows in us. We are born with a particular language faculty, hypothetically speaking, and we are all sensitive to the acquisition of language in the sense that it is not our choice whether or not we acquire human language. In short, a normal human child will speak a language of the surrounding. Lot of these things have been discussed in various parts of the study of language. Today, as mentioned earlier, we are going to be talking about a very specific aspect of natural language, which is called negation. As we understand, there are two types of sentences. Broadly speaking, one, affirmative sentences, and two, negative sentences. What makes a sentence negative is negative markers from natural language. And this is what is our goal for today to understand, and that also with particular reference to some select South Asian languages. In this unit, we have talked about the distribution of negation, that is, how it works across with sentential negation and constituent negation, and we'll take a review of some of the work done by various people in the domain of negation as well. Having looked at the distribution of negation, we will also talk very briefly about the position of negation in a sentence and also in clause structure. And finally, we'll talk about licensing of the negative polarity items and its occurrence in various domains before we conclude. Our understanding of the position of negation in a sentence is part of the syntax of understanding negation. South Asian languages such as Hindi, Bangla, Telugu, Tamil, Malayalam, they vary from one another in terms of the position where negative elements occur in a sentence. However, at a particular level in the study of negation and syntax of negation, we see that South Asian languages behave in one particular way. Negation is a unique thing and a universal feature of natural language. We find negation in most languages, in almost all languages of the world. Several people, researchers like Lasnik, Ladusau, Linebarger, Laka, Ben Mamoon, Lahiri, Mahajan, Prabhupada, to name a few, have studied negation at length. They have dealt with various aspects of negation and their occurrence in a sentence. They have also detailed the position of negation in clause structure with particular reference to the licensing of negative polarity item as well. Some of these studies are syntactic in nature, whereas some of them are talking about semantic aspects of negation in natural languages. What becomes crucial is to understand the morphological and syntactic interface between the two for the study of negation, because a description of negation, particularly sentential negation and constituent negation, is demonstrated at the interface of these two. With particular reference to South Asian languages, studies by Bhatia 1979, Mahajan 1990, some other pieces of literature in the domain of the study of negation, like Jayashilan of South Asian and Dravidian languages in particular, are of significant relevance. And these studies give us descriptive as well as theoretical insights into understanding negation in South Asian languages. Let's look at some of the examples to understand distribution of negation in South Asian languages. We take examples from Hindi to understand the distribution of negation in particular. There are three negative markers in Hindi. They are nahi, na, and mat. As you can see, sentence number 1 is grammatical when it is read as Rajiv aaj Delhi nahi jayega. That is, Rajiv will not go to Delhi today. It is marginally okay, that is marginally grammatical, but not acceptable to a great length when we say Rajiv aaj Delhi na jayega. And it is not acceptable at all when we say Rajiv aaj Delhi mat jayega. Now, what is important here for us to see that in a language like Hindi, there are three negative particles, namely nahi, na, and mat, as discussed in sentence number 1. We also find that these negative elements occur right before the verb, that is, to the left of the verb in the sentence at a surface level. Now, we see the similar instances of negation in sentence 2, where we find another negative marker in sentence 2, मैं doctor नहीं हूँ. This example indicates that even in a copular sentence, by copula we mean present tense marker whom, the negation occurs to the left of the tense marker whom. मैं doctor नहीं हूँ. So, what we see from sentence number 1 and 2 is there are three negative markers in a language like Hindi, namely nahi, na, and mat. They all occur to the left of the verb in a surface order, and there are restrictions on the occurrence of these negative markers. Some are occurrence of one is grammatical, the occurrence of the other is marginally grammatical. However, occurrence of mat as the third one is not grammatical at all. We will see how and where the other markers are grammatical. Sentence number 3, मैं स्कूल नहीं जाता नहीं हूँ. What is important in this sentence is we want to say मैं स्कूल नहीं जाता हूँ. This is a canonical sentence. It follows things that we have discussed before with examples, with reference to examples in 1 and 2. However, when we try to put, as long as the negative element nahi stays to the left of the verb, the sentence is good. However, it is not okay to put nahi in between the verb, that is the lexical element of the verb, and its morphological marker. This is not allowed. And that the star mark that we see here indicates ungrammaticality. That is, if we do this, then the sentence becomes ungrammatical. In other words, a negation cannot interfere the adjacency between the lexical item and the morphological markers on the lexical item. It has to be to the left of the verb, and then the sentence is okay. And similarly, we see मैं स्कूल नहीं जा रहा हूँ और मैं स्कूल नहीं जा रहा था. However, in sentence 5, what we see is the occurrence of negation in between ja and raha is okay. Sentence number 3 indicates that when the aspectual marker is in its lexical form, then the aspectual marker, when appears as a morphological marker on the verb, then the adjacency cannot be disrupted as in 3, whereas if they are two independent lexical items, that is the verb and the aspectual marker, if they are two different lexical markers, lexical items, then a negative element interfering the two, that is interfering the adjacency of the two, is okay, as it is demonstrated in sentence number 5. We need to understand that the negative elements such as mat can only occur in an imperative sentence. Like we can say mat baithiye, mat jaiye, mat dekhiye. However, as we have seen in sentence 1, the use of mat in a non-imperative sentence, that is a tense sentence, is not grammatical. It yields to ungrammaticality. So there is a very strict restriction on the use of the lexical item mat. What we have seen so far is the occurrence of the negative element towards the left of the verb is also indicator of sentential negation, whereas constituent negation, as the name suggests, negates only the particular constituent the negation follows, whereas in sentential negation, the negative element is part of the predicate and it negates the entire sentence. In sentential negation, the negative marker occurs to the left of the verb, whereas in constituent negation, the negative marker occurs to the right of the constituent that it negates on the surface structure. Let's look at some of the examples of constituent negation. In sentence 17, that is example number 17, we find negative marker nahi occurring to the right of the nominal element am, and therefore we conclude that it negates only am, where what it means is when we want to say मैं आम नहीं खाता, we want to say, I can eat anything else. I eat anything else but mangoes. I do not eat mangoes, but I eat something else. In Bangla examples in 18, we see that the negative element noi occurs again right to the nominal doctor. Similarly, in Telugu, we find negative element occurring to the right of the nominal element rice, anam. This is what is significant about constituent negation in our understanding of the negation. Sentence number 22 and 23 help us understand negation and verb phrase. We see that there is an embedded clause in 22 which is in between the object and the verb. And we do see that negative element still occurs to the left of the main verb the. So राजीव ने अपनी किताब ऐसा मुझे लगता है कि रेखा को नहीं दी. If the negation occurs at the initial position of the sentence in 23, then this sentence is ungrammatical. Now, what this helps us understand that negation is really part of the VP and cannot occur anywhere else in the sentence. When we try to understand clause structure with reference to negation and the presence of negation in the clause structure, we can understand it through the example of this diagram that you see on the screen carefully. That negation occurs right lower than the TP and it heads its own phrase and then occurs in the functional domain of the clause structure before we see stacking of lexical elements. This has huge implications for our understanding of how they occur in a sentence and what it does with respect to other elements in the sentence, in particular negative polarity item. Whereas constituent negation, as we have seen earlier, it occurs to the right of the lexical element anam. It is in the syntax of negation, the negative item for constituent negation is part of an adjunction and it is adjoined to the NP that it negates, and as you can see, this is how it works. Now we are coming towards the specific part when negative elements in a sentence intersects with negative polarity items. Negative polarity items are elements that are warranted in a sentence only in the presence of a negative element. We would like to add here a footnote that there are certain contexts in which negative polarity items are also licensed, but those contexts license them in place of negation. So let's spend some time and understand the idea of negative polarity item. So as I mentioned, negative polarity items are sensitive to the presence of negation element in a sentence in natural language. In other words, in the absence of a negative element, in most cases, a negative polarity item does not occur. Let's see some examples. So in a sentence 26 from Hindi, ek fruity kauri is an example of a negative polarity item. And I'll demonstrate it to you why we say this is an example of a negative polarity item. This is a frozen metaphorical expression, but in a Hindi sentence, it occurs only when a negative element is present in the sentential position in the clause structure of a sentence. That is, only sentential negation can license negative polarity items. Therefore, what is crucially important is to understand the position of sentential negative in the clause structure for our understanding of licensing of negative polarity items little later. Now, if we do not put this negative element nahi in this sentence, then the sentence becomes ungrammatical, as you can see from the example 27. मैं तुमको एक फूटी कौड़ी नहीं दूंगा. This is what we have in 26. But what we see in 27 is मैं तुमको एक फूटी कौड़ी दूंगा. Now, this sentence 27 is okay or could be interpreted as a good sentence if एक फूटी कौड़ी as a metaphorical expression can be interpreted in its lexical and literal sense of a broken penny. However, that is not the context, that's not the intended reading here. What we really want to say, this I will not give you a red cent. And when we want to say such things, we must need a negative element in the sentence. So this helps us conclude that sentence 27 is ungrammatical only because what is missing from it is the negative element nahi, which is part of sentence 26. This type of negative polarity item is also known as little bit of a strict type, that these types can only be licensed by a negative element. I mentioned a little earlier, and I'm going to demonstrate it to you, that there are some negative elements which can have its meaning even in the absence of negation, but in a certain very specified contexts. However, these types, such as ek futi kori, no other contexts but negation can only license it. So, the other restriction on the licensing of these strict type of negative polarity items is that the negation and the negative polarity item both must be part of the same clause. That is, there must not be another clause intervening the adjacency of the two, as you see in example in 28. What does 28 show us? मैंने तुमसे ये नहीं कहा कि मैं तुमको एक फूटी कौड़ी दूंगा. What we see in this sentence, which is ungrammatical to begin with, is the negative element nahi is part of the different clause, whereas ek futi kori as a negative polarity marker is part of another clause, is not warranted. That is, the negative polarity item and the negation must be clause-mate. Technically, this is known as the negative polarity item must be in the C commanding domain of the negation. That is, certain strict type of negative polarity items must only be licensed when it exists in the C commanding domain of the negative element within the same clause. Such is the restriction on the licensing of negative polarity items. Now, there is yet another debate on this, whether or not this is licensed at logical form, that is, at the level of LF. This discussion brings us a different dimensions to our understanding, and it takes us to yet another deeper level of our understanding of how negative elements in general and negative polarity items in particular work in natural language vis-a-vis human mind. This also helps us understand that negative elements interact with other constituents of, in a sentence, very strictly defined environment and also under certain specific conditions. We need to look at certain weaker types of negative polarity items. So, ek phuti kori example is an example of a strong NPI. Now we are going to look at certain weaker types of NPIs. Let's look at 29 from Hindi. उस कमरे में कोई भी स्टूडेंट नहीं था. कोई भी is another example of NPI, and it is licensed by the presence of the negative element nahi. They occur in the same clause. Negation licenses negative polarity item when both of them coexist in the same clause, and negation C commands the negative polarity item. There is absolutely no difficulty in this sentence. This type of sentence is also known as canonical sentence for understanding negative polarity item and its interaction with negation. What we see that this NPI, that is koi bhi, is also good if the negation element and the negative polarity item occur in two different clauses. Let's look at sentence 30. मैंने यह नहीं सोचा कि उस कमरे में कोई भी स्टूडेंट है. Now, नहीं occurs in a different clause and कोई भी occurs in yet another clause. This tells us that the restriction that we have seen in the strong type of NPI, that the two, that is NPI and negative element, must occur in the same clause, is not applicable in case of weaker NPIs. Weaker NPIs, for the licensing of weaker NPIs, the domain is little wider, and negation, being in a separate clause, being in a higher clause, can still take negative polarity items in its scope and license. Now, example in 31 shows us that a weaker NPI is also licensed in the absence of a negative marker, but this must be a very specific type of context. That is what we see here. Let's look at sentence 30 first. What is this? This says, क्या उस कमरे में कोई भी student था? What type of a sentence is this? This is a question sentence. And there is no negative marker nahi in this sentence. However, we still find this sentence grammatical. What can we conclude? That this sentence is grammatical even in the absence of a negative polarity item, which was not the case in the strong NPIs, only because a context like question can license weaker NPIs but not stronger NPIs. Thus, what we understand with our discussion so far, that we have looked at two things in particular. We have looked at negative elements, we have looked at their distributions, and then we have looked at how it intersects with licensing of negative polarity items. That is, how negation and negative elements affect certain other elements in a sentence. So we saw there are three types of negation in a language like Hindi. When we look deeper at individual languages, we find different types of negative markers in them. Mostly they have 3 to 4. There are languages, South Asian languages, where we have only 2 negative markers, but a language like Hindi has 3, and there could be yet another negative marker in some South Asian languages. However, there is no South Asian language where we find too many negative markers. In all of them, that is as part of the natural language, we find that negation occurs and heads its own phrase in the clause structure. It looks like a lexical element, but it's a functional category. It occurs in the functional domain. It is dominated by TP, only TP. And then we went ahead with these examples to see two types of negations, namely sentential negation and constituent negations. We saw that sentential negation negates the entire sentence as it negates the predicate, whereas constituent negation negates only the constituent it occurs after. That is, constituent negation. For constituent negation, negative marker occurs to the right. In sentential negation, negative marker occurs to the left of the verb. And having looked at their position in the clause structure, we looked at two types of NPIs, namely strong NPI and weak NPI. We have seen very little examples in this demonstration, in this presentation. I invite you to take examples from your language, the language that you speak, and take a look at what are the strong NPIs in your language and what are the weaker NPIs. Whether what we have discussed, that is only sentential negation can license negative polarity items except a few contexts, whether or not it works in your language. How question licenses a weaker NPI in a language like Hindi, and whether it works this way in the language that you speak or not. So please take some examples from the languages that you speak and apply what you have learned in this discussion about negation and negative polarity items. It will be a fun exercise. I'm sure about it. Thank you.